Hi, I'm Robert Rickover, an Alexander Technique teacher in Omaha, Nebraska, and my guest is Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. And we've done a series, three interviews, all related to concentration, Alexander's view of concentration, different types of concentration. Um, but I want to go to Alexander had this sort of sequence of why we modern people, and he's writing in 1923, we modern people are have such have he one the sequence to concentration in his view is poor use of yourself leading to mind wandering leading to concentration. And when he's talking about poor use of himself, he contrasts our use, or the people of 1923's use, to that of, and it's a little embarrassing to say this, but savages and wild animals. So first thing to
His words,
yeah,
just
his
making
words,
that
right?
extremely
Savage.
clear.
Um, and I just have to find
Well, it strikes me, I'm just going to jump in.
yeah,
You could say that civilized people,
yeah.
we are not as in touch with the natural world.
Mhm.
And in the natural world, you'll get, you need to have an open attention, right? Because you need to be aware if a predator is coming. But you also, anyway, I'm just thinking.
I'm not sure Alexander thought about that. All
Mhm.
he said, all he saw was these savages who did amazing things. And I want to read this again because I think it's pretty amazing. The most that he is his writing in Constructive Conscious Control, his second book. Most of us are aware of the marvelous accuracy in the use of manifested by the wild animal or the savage. I'm going to abbreviate it, or savages. The civilized creature does not manifest anything like the same standard of accuracy or the employment of his body in doing things. In other words, we don't enjoy the standard of effective direction and control uh, as the savage and the wild animal. And it is this lack of adequate standard in the human creature which manifests itself as a shortcoming in their activities. And I've said the sphere of learning and learning how to do something. So he's saying, the our problem is that we have relatively poor use of ourselves. Savages have great use of themselves. Now, it's very hard to talk, it's embarrassing to talk
I
about
wonder if we can update the terminology
indigenous
we're
people. I think
using.
we should maybe talk about indigenous people, or as Canada does, First Nations.
Yeah, even that doesn't mean they're not living in a 21st century environment.
Right. Well,
We're talking about people living in a very natural environment.
yeah, and the problem is that there are not that many of those people left.
Left, yeah,
And so we, yeah, so anyway, so he's writing
yeah.
in
So it's
1920.
challenging to talk about, but yeah,
Well, he's talking in 1923,
yeah,
and you might, when I first read that paragraph, the first thought that crossed my mind was it would be interesting to see what these indigenous people have to teach us? I mean, if they're going around doing great things, really, you know, well, and we're not, maybe we could learn something from them. But that's not where Alexander wants to go. Uh,
No, he doesn't,
he
unfortunately.
definitely doesn't want to go there. But there's it's kind of interesting when I read that and have been doing all the research for these conversations. Uh, I remembered something I heard years ago on CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company, about a priest who was in what is today Nova Scotia,
Mhm.
an island province, Atlantic island province of Canada. And this priest was interested in what these people did during their day. What was their day like?
Mhm.
And they were Indian. They were an Indian tribe. Tribe of I forget the name now. They did fishing. They did hunting. They did planting. They
So
had
they were living in a very traditional
very traditional.
manner.
Yeah, very few. They were had very little encounter with Western people.
Hmm.
Um, they had a wide variety of activities that they did, seasonal, a lot of seasonal ones. And so their schedules were kind of irregular. But he worked out that they spend on average 15 hours a week doing what they needed to take care of their needs. Sometimes it'd be a lot more, sometimes it'd be a lot less.
Hmm.
15-hour workday, 15-hour work week would not be bad, really.
Wow, that's pretty
So, but
good.
then he thought, well, what do they do during the rest of the time? They sleep, obviously.
Hmm.
He said what they did mainly was talk to each other, hang out, tell stories, do some smudging exercises, some religious rites, and they weren't bored. They were doing stuff all the time, but they were doing what they wanted to do.
That's the
The
key
other,
point. They were doing
yeah,
what they wanted to do.
yeah, and um, the, there was a methodological
Methodology?
problem in that there's really no sharp distinction in their world between work and play.
Yeah.
It was a little iffy. Now I did some research, and apparently among many African Aboriginal people, the estimate was something like 2 or 3 hours a day.
Hmm.
In the same
Of what
ballpark.
might be considered work, you
Yeah,
mean?
what they needed to get the food they needed and the shelter and so forth. And most of the time, they too were talking to each other, hanging around. Huh. So I remember thinking when I first read this, maybe we should try to learn something. But unfortunately, it's a little late because um, they're gone mostly. But what's interesting to me is that um, he says the reason why we have such poor use of ourselves, again, 1923, is that so much is going on that we can't keep track of it. The demands of life are very complex. And he says, even people 200 years ago, so 1720,
Mhm.
had much better use of themselves than we do now. It's just gotten.
Although how he knew that, I don't quite know.
He didn't say. He said he speculated.
Just
He
speculating.
speculated on that.
Yes.
But I was thinking, 1923 was an interesting date because, I mean, talk about upheavals. We had World War One, the worst war ever fought in history until more recently,
Hmm.
right? they also, with
Had
many
the,
people dying, in
they had the
England,
flu.
especially in
The
England and in all the European countries,
Mhm.
everyone knew someone who died. It was
And it was immediately followed by the massive flu
exactly the
pandemic.
so-called
Yeah.
Spanish flu, which
Mhm.
wiped out millions and millions of people, came out of nowhere. No one was prepared for it, and it had a huge impact on life. And so someone in 1923 probably was dealing with a lot of stuff that your typical Aboriginal wasn't dealing with.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'm just struck. I'm remembering at an Alexander Technique conference, and you may have been at the same one. Someone gave the keynote speech, the FM Alexander Memorial Address or whatever, and they had footage of people walking and being
oh,
about their business.
yeah,
And I
Bob
think it was
Britton.
in
I
the
think it was Bob
1920s.
Britton. Bob
And I
Britton.
think it was in the 1920s,
Yeah,
certainly maybe between the two wars, and comparing it to use today, and that was probably like 10, at least 10 years ago now, and how much better it was back then in terms of kind of uprightness and
yeah, yeah,
that you could see. And so that was what Alexander was living in, and that seemed very poor compared with what,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
You can see there are a lot of videos now showing that kind of thing. People
Hmm.
walking, uh, 2 or 3 minute clips of just people walking and
Yeah.
long time ago kind of
Yeah.
films. So yeah, and I should add also that in terms of upheaval, America was hit by the Spanish flu, not so much by the war, although to some extent,
The
but
Great
America just
Depression.
had a civil war, which not just, but like 50 years earlier, it had a civil war, which had giant implications for everybody. So
Hmm.
there was a lot to adjust to. Now, the thing is, we're talking about the people living in Nova Scotia or the Aboriginal people in Australia, Africa, places like that. Um, Alexander, it's kind of funny because someone on one of the Facebook groups says that Alexander was believed didn't believe in capitalism. I know that sounds weird, but Alexander very much believed in capitalism in this case. He was not at all interested in going back to primitive life. He was not like Rousseau, the
Hmm.
ideal
Hmm.
savage
Hmm.
kind of guy. He believed in progress, even if that progress caused huge dislocations in people's selves, and yeah, so I'd say that's just a little
Yes.
aside, but he was not a return to nature kind of a guy at all.
I, I know
He had
it's
left
strange.
nature. He left nature in Tasmania and went to the urban world in London and stayed there. He
Mhm.
didn't want to go back to Australia.
Well, he'd had his place in the country, right?
Yeah, but that's different. Yeah, but he also,
The English countryside, are you saying, is a little tamer than Tasmania in the early
Tasmania
1900s?
was not a great place then at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think it's kind of interesting that
Yeah, it's this kind of paradox that he admires
he
the
admires
youth,
them, but
but
unfortunately for them, it's too they they just aren't there anymore. And of course, he talks about them a lot at the beginning of his first book, Man's Supreme Inheritance. And he said, these people, their day has come and gone, and we're moving on. And it's too bad. Oddly enough, one of the examples that he gives is the Ainu of Japan, who there's pretty good evidence are ancestors of the samurai in Japan.
Mm.
And the Ainu were looked down upon by most Japanese, but the samurai, that's
Hmm.
so he picked the wrong one, maybe as an example. But anyway, so I just think that's kind of interesting because it fits in with his idea of what's causing our current maladies. I think it probably is true that most of us, even in pretty serene environments, are dealing with more things than the average person did 100, 200 years ago. On the other hand, I think being an Aboriginal in the jungle was no
It wasn't a bed of roses.
not bed of roses because you had predators, you had slavers, you
Hmm.
had all kinds of issues that could come up in
Hmm.
your life that would be pretty traumatic. But in any event, that's Alexander's take on that whole
Hmm.
topic. So this kind of concludes our series of 4 conversations about concentration and its causes and how to
I've just occurs to me, just because we've been talking about the kind of nature, is that I feel like I do, and I know many other Alexander teachers do bring in examples from nature or looking out on the big horizon, um, ideas
yeah,
into the work.
like with like pictures on their wall, like off to their right of the seashore.
Yes, or like look out of the window at the tree as the
Yeah,
I've definitely have been having a hands-on lesson with a teacher, but they're having me look beyond and look especially outside,
yeah.
you know.
Alexander was very big on that.
So
Yeah,
it's and of course that's getting me not to concentrate and focus
yeah,
in
yeah.
on what's going on, that I'm experiencing this and I'm out in the world. But I do think there's a lot that nature can teach us and it's beneficial.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um,
Anyway, well, that's the end of our series. And this
okay.
episode, my guest has been Imogen Ragone, who's put up with many of such interviews in the past, an Alexander teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. And I will put a link to her site, and I'll put a link. These 4 conversations will all have links to the other 3.
Mhm.
So thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you. It's very interesting, thought-provoking.